fabrics so that they're small enough to fit on your cutting board so that you can cut long strips, either for strip sets or for borders, can be a little bit flummoxing sometimes. You're like, how do I go about doing this? So I'm going to show you how I go about doing it. And other people might do it some other way, and that's great too, as long as it works. But what we're trying to do is end up with strips that don't have any narrow areas or wide areas, strips that are actually all the same width when we're done. And so I've got a piece of fabric here that's about 72 inches long. And I know that these two ends of it are very true, and I know they're true because I've ripped them. So that's always the very first thing I do, is I rip the two far ends of the fabric, and it will rip true to grain, and therefore I know that it's straight. And so that's the very first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to line up those two ripped edges, and then I know that that is a straight edge that I can use. So once I've lined up those two edges, and that becomes a straight edge that I can use, I am then going to work myself up to a fold. And once I work myself up to a fold, that fold then also becomes a straight edge. Now you can iron that fold if you want to and make it really crisp, or you can finger press that fold. It's up to you. And I am simply going to finger press it. Like so. Now once I've done that, I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to put it on my cutting surface, on my mat here. And I'm going to put it so that this true edge is going to be on one of the straight lines. Like so. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to true up an edge, but I can't do that until I have now taken this fold and lined it up with that also. So what I want is the fold and the raw edge, so I'm going to kind of do this here, are lined up with each other as perfectly as I can get them. And I'm going to use this ruler and insert it in there and pull this fabric like so, so that I don't have any excess in this fold over here. I'm going to make sure I have no excess in this fold here either, by pushing that ruler in there and then pulling it out. Because if I have excess in there, then I'm going to end up with a very funky shaped strip. Then I'm going to line it up with that straight edge. And this should be lined up also. And that looks really good. And then I can go ahead and make my first cut. So I'm going to square up this edge or true up this edge. Now, depending on how wide I'm going to cut and what kind of ruler I have, I can go ahead and turn this whole thing around very carefully and cut off of my ruler rather than off of my mat, or I can simply move my ruler. Well, I want to make 4.5-inch strips, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it on the mat itself, move over 4.5 inches, and cut. And then the moment of truth will show if I can open this up, and I have a nice straight, nothing gernunkly there. And where this fold was, nice and straight and nothing gernunkly there. Gernunkly, that's a really proper word, but it just means a mistake, something that's not good. So this is how we are going to cut something that's very long and we can't fit on our mat by itself. We want to make sure that we start with something that we can determine is a straight edge, and that is not the fold. The fold could be totally off. It's ripping off those two ends to find the true grain and matching those two ends up and then pushing in the fold in the middle. That's the trick. So rip those two ends off. You're going to lose a little bit of fabric. That's okay. Make sure that you buy excess so that that's not a problem. And then fold it just like I showed you, and you'll have wonderfully, perfectly straight, long strips of fabric to use for your borders and to use for binding and to use if you're doing strip sets.